So I just kind of want to get an idea from you what you consider channeling. What does that mean to you? I know when we first had this conversation, you're like, well, I don't consider myself a channeler, and then I'm like, well, I know I've been told I'm going to work with channelers, but I know you said you tap into the halls, wisdom and knowledge, and basically we kind of have this same thought about what we're doing. We
Right.
just call it different terms. So
Right. You're right. That's very true. I think it's kind of a terminology difference. But,
yeah.
Channeling has been around for a very long time. We look back to early trance mediumship and they were considered, channeling. And so it's a term that's been around for quite some time, since the rise of spiritualism in the late 1800s. So it's certainly not a new term. And so it kind of does depend on how you personally define it. And I think that that's what's really important. Basically a channel is someone who steps aside, right? They put their personality aside and they allow information to come through in this very, what's considered pure voice. And so it is a stepping aside. So that channeling really can happen again in trance mediumship, where they're stepping aside and they're allowing this flow to take place. And then what happens in the channeling is who and or what are you connecting with? That becomes the next question. But it's really a detachment. So I like to consider channeling, in essence, it's a level of connection. It's a deepness, right? It's how deep are you going? Because a regular mediumship session is still channeling. It's how far have you gone? How far have you detached? How much in flow are you? How much are you stepping aside? Ideally, we should be stepping aside as deeply as we can when we're doing any type of, spiritual or psychic work. The same is probably true for you. How much can we step aside? But we do attribute, I think, channeling to receiving in this pure form. I mean, would that be kind of how you would define it as well?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, when I work with many of the channelers that I work with, it's pretty incredible because I'm able to get them relaxed to the point where they can actually hear those voices on the other side and connect. Now, there is a different level of connection sometimes when people are channeling, because there's many aspects of ourselves as we ascend and go, learn and have this journey on earth. So there's different aspects of someone that I'm channeling with, and they might be tapped into spirit guides. They might be tapped into grandparents. They might be tapped into ancestors, way back when.
Sure.
They might be tapped into their higher self, the divine part of themselves. And then I was always told that it's really important that I make sure that it's always coming from the heart space. So that was my biggest advice that I was given whenever I am channeling with someone. I'll always be able to tell
Absolutely.
where it's coming from based on what I'm feeling and if it's heart connected. Because if you're not careful, you can tap into some of those lower
Absolutely.
astral forms.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we get hung up on the word channeling and and I think that it can have some negative connotations, and it did for me as well, when really it's still a level of awareness. It's just a deep, intense level of awareness. And so people go, oh, it's channeled. They think they're talking to aliens or beings and I think sometimes people are, but we can also channel non-sentient forms of information, whether you call that Akashic or fields of information. Athletes have these superhuman experiences where they talk about, I was connected to something greater than myself. There was something happening in that moment where there was a level of performance that kicked in that wasn't me. It was beyond me, right? And so in many ways, they're channeling something that is beyond themselves, even though they wouldn't identify that as channeling per se. So I think it's a term, and I think it can be received positively or negatively, depending on who you're communicating in, like a living person back and forth. How do you explain that to those individuals? Yeah.